and we've got the slides ready, so thank you. Thanks so much. Yes, we're on. So this is me. I previously worked at Meta when it was called Facebook. In fact, I was even part of the previous rebrand when it rebranded from Facebook to Facebook. So if you saw that, that was my work. You're really impressed. So obviously they've now pivoted and call themselves Meta, and they're thinking about all things metaverse and kind of what comes next. And it was partly their pivot that got me. That was the final straw that made me think, yes, this is what I want to work in full time, rather than just kind of spending hours and hours on my phone researching this kind of thing. So I've been sort of head of marketing for digital agencies and basically worked in digital and social and creative things for the last 10 or so years. And now I'm going full throttle in this area because I think this is where the sort of most exciting innovation is happening. So welcome to the age of the metaverse. I know all of you will have some familiarity with Web3. Out of interest, how many of you have bought NFTs before? Okay, all of you. That was a big yes at the back. Okay, so you'll also have had quite probably not brilliant user experience trying to get NFTs. It does feel like we're at the kind of early, slightly clunky stages of technology. But yeah, we are entering Web 3.0, and realistically, maybe we're in Web 2.5 at the moment. However, the metaverse economy is predicted to be worth $13 trillion by 2030. So it does feel like everything is very much moving in this direction. And I suppose my concern, or also my passion, is making sure that if all of this sort of funding and let's all go this direction, this kind of gold rush phase, that we don't forget some of the important questions about how do we build sustainable businesses. And I mean sustainable actually mostly in the human sense. There's also the environmental impact we need to be thinking about. There's just some more big numbers to throw at you. Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z, have a big $4.5 billion Web3 fund. There's also Catherine Horn started the biggest ever female-funded venture capital fund under Horn Ventures for $1.5 billion earlier this year. It does feel like there's literally like money being thrown at this area. You'll also have seen, it sounds like you're all quite familiar with this scene. Crypto is down, NFTs are all down. I think we're at this really interesting inflection point where there's all this excitement and interest, but outside of our little sort of core, you've got these headlines saying that NFTs are all going to shit, or like there's a lot of negativity around. And I don't know if you're familiar with, I probably should have included actually. There's a Gartner hype cycle showing the sort of peak of hype, which I think we've already had with NFTs, with crazy millions of dollars valuation, come crashing back down to the trough of disillusionment. But we're about to hit something called the slope of enlightenment, where you get mainstream adoption of these technologies. And so that's why, while we're in this kind of rubbish bit, it's a really interesting moment to be building our businesses, building products. And so this is when we get a chance to sort of catch our breath and be thinking about, okay, can we also sort of do it in a diverse way? Can it be, can our products be accessible? Can the user experience be a bit nicer? Because that normally helps everybody, the better it is. Because at the moment it is a male-dominated space. This data is a tiny bit out of date. It's from earlier this year, but 4% of NFT sales have been by work by female artists. I suspect that number's higher now. It's probably, I would guesstimate, around sort of 15, maybe as much as 20%. But basically, yeah, the NFT space especially is very male, and I really noticed that coming into it. So the reason I ended up getting obsessed with this whole area is partly because I had a baby, and so if any of you had a newborn in the house, all you do is just kind of trapped on a sofa or a bed, either like feeding or the baby's sleeping, and I'm just sitting there for hours. So just me and my baby and my phone, and I got completely obsessed. So actually, it's probably a good thing I didn't get radicalized into something much worse. So yeah, I've lived to tell the tale, and but I did find that as I went into lots of Discord, different Discord servers, I did feel like people were speaking another language. So there's partly the jargon of kind of NFTs and Web3 and blockchain itself, but I think there's also a certain enjoyment people take in making, like, slightly excluding other people, not in a not intending to be mean, but more like, creating this sense of exclusivity and excitement and feeling part of something. But if you don't have that language, you're basically locked out, and you kind of feel like, oh, I don't think I belong here. Is this for me? Maybe there could be an opportunity for people like me to be in this space, which is why I sort of what ended up thinking like I want to create a set of, whether it's like events, or I wasn't quite sure what, to help rectify that. By the way, you might also have seen that there since have been a lot of NFT PFP projects, so like profile picture style, basically JPEGs of cartoony women, and actually a lot of these are really cool, but I do think we can do something really much cooler. Like if you, this feels like very much the start of, that representation-wise, that's like really the early days, is just having cartoons that better represent me and my sort of the diversity of my friends and who I hang out with. So, can't remember what my next slide is. Oh, I basically want to avoid a sort of dystopian situation where Web3 promises this kind of quite egalitarian idea of everybody's going to get sort of ownership over, whether it's through NFTs, almost like everybody as an investor in a company, something like everyone getting a piece of the pie, and actually not really playing out that way at the moment. You're getting, if anything, you're getting sort of more extremes of like people making a huge amount of money from NFTs and crypto, and then people that just arrived and kind of go, I can't afford any of that. And the same with who's building. It's at the moment it is sort of very male, and there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. But again, this is sort of massive opportunity to change that, because technology is meant to it's meant to meet the needs of a huge variety of users. It's meant to be for everybody. Technology should be for everybody. So when you're thinking about who is building and who is kind of in the room making these decisions, that's what I feel like I'm really excited to help change. So as I say, there's nothing wrong with having very male teams, but this is our big opportunity to help shift that. So I created Women of Web3. So it is, I talk about it being connecting women in the iteration of the internet. A tiny bit, I very slightly regret that strap line, because I think people instantly think, okay, there's going to be a Discord that can be part of, or that there should be a Discord or a Telegram, and we don't have either of those. So we're not connecting people in the sort of traditional Web3 way. However, there is in-person connections. So, for example, next week we're doing an event held in Vauxhall, where we've got a sort of breakfast event overlooking the Thames and talking about careers in Web3 and basically demystifying like what roles exist, how do I get a job like that, can I pivot my Web2 role, or kind of what the company I currently work in, can I persuade my bosses that maybe I can make it a Web3 role? People have done that, and that's who I'm trying to, a couple of people I know, to come and speak about it. And a major part of it as well, my mic's changed, can everybody still hear me okay? Something changed, but we're all good. Oh, there we go. A big thing is the jobs factor. I think getting in front of getting these roles in front of a lot of female talent, I think, is going to be a game changer. And there's also the kind of point of role models, but there's only so much that I can execute, basically. So that this is what I've sort of kept it refined down to, is there's a jobs board where any Web3 startup or DAO or anybody can post a role for free, and it's aimed at women. Actually, anybody could apply through the same channels. So like, you men can apply on the Women of Web3 jobs board as well if you want to. There's also a talent collective where employers can pay to access this pool of vetted female talent. So people have applied from kind of tech and policy and, to be honest, all aspects of business, and sort of creative backgrounds that are interested to work in Web3 because they see the potential in it. And so, this is kind of a ready-made pool of talent, which I feel really excited about. Resources-wise, to me, it's so important to be demystifying this area, especially what I was mentioning about jargon, because of the way it locks people out and makes them believe this isn't for me and I don't belong. And so in the weekly podcast, so I was actually really excited last week, not quite sure what day it is, recently, in the last week, released an episode with Randy Zuckerberg, so sister of Mark. She is just this kind of super friendly, down-to-earth person. She also really cares about the same set of things in terms of helping make this area inclusive and in a way that's quite in stark contrast with what makes NFTs successful, because that's about exclusivity and hype and speculation. She's kind of bringing it right back down to, let's make it super friendly, accessible, anybody can understand it, you're all welcome here. So it's kind of an interesting proposition in this space. Again, with the podcast, I think that's what helps people make sense of it, is hearing it, like today, getting to hear from speakers. When you hear about this stuff out loud, it just makes so much more sense than when you're kind of scrolling on Twitter being like, I wonder what WAGME means, or whatever it is that end up by, or just, I don't know, for me, it can be a bit of a turn off. Like sometimes when I've like read a few like press releases by blockchain startups, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know why I should be excited about this and what it can offer me in my life. Having said that, I've actually kind of concluded that I'm less excited about blockchain technology itself in the same way as I don't know how to code mobile apps, but I care about everything that lives in my phone and what it enables me to do. And that's how I feel about Web3, NFTs, DAOs, the metaverse more broadly. Is this technology is going to enable all the cool stuff, and actually I'm less worried about the actual building blocks, but know that that's what powers it. So finally, the connections point is helping people meet up in real life. What I'm not quite sure how to do is the audience is really spread out globally. So actually now there's more, say, listeners to the podcast is actually higher in the US than the UK, but I'm only doing events here. So if you have sensible ideas how I can sort of scale that without it getting untenable, come chat to me. And then just lastly, it was really important to me, because so many NFTs require you to grind and like try so hard just to get permission to buy them, which is something you wouldn't find in buying any other product really. It feels like a very NFT thing. So I was certain that it's not an NFT in itself, it's not a DAO, or at least that's not the intention for now, that could change eventually, but that I didn't want people to require having a crypto wallet ready, especially because if you're a beginner, and a lot of my content is aimed at beginners, it's so easy to get scammed and tricked. Like, there's quite sophisticated scams out there, and if you are new, you just wouldn't know. I don't know, I think we forget outside of Web3 London that people do just kind of quite easily click on links, that it would be quite normal to do that. Now we've been burned quite a few times in this space. We know not to. But it does make it a slightly more passive learning experience than going and say buying an NFT and actually experimenting and as I say, wanted an option that was free for all end users rather than requiring money or peddling really hard just to access the resources. So when thinking more broadly of kind of what people can take home from this, is when we're actually, sorry, one more audience question is, would you raise your hand if you're running or part of a Web3 startup? Okay, so some, but not all. So this would probably especially apply to Web3 startups, and anybody that's doing this full time is to be thinking about inclusion and intersectionality of like, who is my product aimed at? Could we broaden that out? Who is actually the person or the set of people building it? And creating a sort of welcoming culture for anybody and everybody to be part of that and to feel safe being at work and being themselves at work. I think the jargon point is actually really important. That if you know the words for everything, it's easy to forget that you didn't used to. And actually, if you are earlier in the game or you're not sort of part of the in crowd, it just feels quite crap. And if you're thinking about accessibility, you want to break down that jargon and sort of talk in language that people understand. To me, it's also important creating visible role models. So for me, genuinely, this is probably the most women I've seen in an audience of a Web3 event that I've spoken at. And I think that's probably partly because there's been represented in speaking night. Like people, we are quite, literal like that. Like I see somebody like me, maybe that's for me. That's something I can be part of. And so that visibility is super, super important. I've said, don't reinvent the wheel. We've learned so much in terms of building businesses when it comes to anything to do with diversity and inclusion and helping people feel like their best selves at work. We can apply so many of those learnings super easily in Web3. We don't need to start from scratch and sort of wonder how to do this. Anybody that's worked in sort of big corporates have sets of, or whether it's kind of rules and policies or ideas and suggestions and really cool programs. So like, you could run something like Women of Web3 within a Web3 startup to kind of, it'd also like boost your own PR, to be honest, is seeing pros kind of thing. And finally, the default. Think about what assumptions we're making when we're building products is super important. A couple of people I know in the Web3 space, both of whom are Black, have both separately mentioned that when trying out a VR headset and a sort of more immersive virtual world, that when they looked down at their hands, they were white hands, and that's quite jarring, and that shouldn't really be the case. And so I don't have a kind of direct suggestion as to exactly what to do to solve that, but it's about taking yourself out of yourself when you're building and creating, just kind of making yourself slow down a bit as to kind of, who is this for? Does it work for everybody? And asking the hard questions. And I've also said to think affordability, because it's very easy for NFTs especially to kind of get wildly expensive, and while that's really sort of sexy and exciting, then you're suddenly locking out a lot of people who are just never going to be able to afford that sort of thing whatsoever. So to me, it would be important that you might have like a suite of different products at different price points that can different people can access. So yeah, just finally, when thinking about playing your part, so think about that intersectionality point. People come from all walks of life and their identities intersect. So like might be female and bisexual, and they'd be all sorts of layers to your personality or to your identity that affect who you are and how you show up at work, and the job that you do, but also the products that you consume. I think it's really important to ask the hard questions. So like, if you're a very male team, for example, or building NFTs that are all about the hype and just trying to make the price go as high as possible, you're asking yourself questions about like, who does that end up leaving out, and is that a long-term plan? In fact, I think maybe I should have changed some of my wording. I think it is about the kind of long-term planning. It's very easy to think short-term in all things Web3 because we're just so excited, and so it's about building sustainably, asking thoughtful questions, holding each other accountable when it comes to this kind of thing, but still getting to have fun with it. So this is kind of I implore you, this is now our time to build an equitable next iteration of the internet and really deliver on what Web3 promises in terms of, divesting the power to the people, to everybody, and because tech should be for everybody. Thank you.